All right, we're clapped in. I had to get us going because we got a cleaning lady here, and we're at our buddy Justin's place, and I definitely want to get. There's a lot I want to get to, but we're also, like when you have like these conversations pre-podcast, and you're like, "Fuck, I want to talk about it on the podcast. I want to talk about that on the podcast."
Yeah.
Definitely want to talk saunas. Definitely want to talk about your culture, your ancestry, where you come from. Also want to dive in. We just had Paul Saladino here, the carnivore doc, and we'll dive into a lot of the knowledge, that you have on mushrooms, all things mushrooms. Obviously, we're going to talk about your company, but this was really cool. This is a gift that you gave me, and I wanted you to break this down because I think this is a good thing, a cool thing to share.
Yeah, that's a kuksa or kuksi, depending on which Sami tribe or which part of the northern part of Scandinavia you come from. And that is a classic mug. And just to highlight a few things, so it's made out of gnarled birch. So it's the same tree that the chaga mushroom grows in. So the tree kind of gets sick, so it kind of curves, so it gets denser. So when it gets super dense, it's easy to carve out. So you kind of chop that, and there's about 20 work stages to do that, including like soak it in coffee. But you never have to wash that. You just rinse it, hot or cold. And what's cool about that mug is besides the ancestry of very few people make these mugs anymore. They make a bunch of them in China. You can get them on Amazon, just like machine made, but it's not they crack really easily. So one of the things is having these little twirls here show the density of the wood. But the other part is, I grew up in the Boy Scouts and camping and being in the forest. It's really cool because you always have it hanging. So when you get to a stream, you can just get some spring water, but it doesn't make a noise because it doesn't bang. There's no metal, anything. It's just wood. So it's silent mug that you can just hang and then just have hot, cold. Great in the winter. I just in Lapland, and it was like really cold, and it's amazing then. And summer, spring, great then. So it's pretty handy. But
it sounds good for Burning Man and hunting trips
exactly. There's a special feeling about like high quality handmade items that can be valued beyond just the functionality. And what I mean with that is we have these rituals in life, and appreciating those rituals. And let's say like drinking coffee or matcha or just water, really good spring water. When you hold it in a good glass or a mug, you appreciate it more. I feel like it's intentional to me.
Yeah.
To me, at least, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and I think that, you're saying to you, and that's certainly true. There's that was a download I had after ayahuasca once. Was I was talking about that, like, why in dieta do we come off caffeine? And they said, well, you're trying to get into this deeper restful state, and you don't want to be charged up. And I was like, but is there something inherently wrong? Because it is a plant. Arguably, it's a drug. It's a drug. It has a lot of drug-like factors that go into that. And what the shaman told me was, it's something that should be used with respect and reverence, just like you use ayahuasca. It should be something that you have a ritual with and an intention behind, not just, I wake up, this is a part of my daily routine, I'm going to slam this thing and go get after life, but like actually to take a moment and appreciate what that plant's doing for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's when you have a coffee by a campfire after doing some forest work or hiking, and you prepare it and you make the wood and just the preparation, or whisking matcha, it's so much more special than just like in a hurry grabbing a big cup. The other thing I want to say about psychedelics and caffeine, although there is a time and place for those, but understanding the energy, and I love that we're starting with this, the most woo-woo part, but caffeine is very like masculine energy. It's very like blinders on, linear, right? And a lot of, not all, but many of these psychedelics are a more feminine energy of expanding and very non-linear. So it just be good to mindful is that herbalism, there are uppers and there's downers. There is the yin and the yang, and understanding the time and place. Something that might be awesome might not be awesome at that moment, and knowing the time and place. So we love in health to demonize something like caffeine is good or bad, coffee is good or bad, nicotine, good or bad. Often it's neither. It's just a time and place. and having that right time and place. So
and how you create space for the medicine.
Correct.
Not just taking off work and things like that, all important, but creating space around what you're putting in your body so that it actually does its job and you get the effect that you're looking for.
Yeah. I think more and more people are waking up to the set and the setting, but also like the work around it. It's not just that ceremony. It's so much more.
Yeah, brother. Well, let's dive into background. I mean, we're already jumped in. I want to get your background, talk about where you're from, talk about, the history of the land and just, what got you here. Obviously, I've read a couple of your books and understand this, but I think it's a really cool story to see. And that's something that I always start with is just seeing like what brought this person here today. And you have, one of my favorite companies on the planet. You're obviously super dialed in, and there's a lot to discuss among mushrooms in general, but talk about life growing up.
Yeah, I grew up in Finland on our family farm that has been with the family for at least since 1619. Finland is only 100 years old, so we were part of Sweden for 650 years and a little over 100 years of Russia. So it's actually, the farm has even gone through a few different rulings. But growing up at the land near Nokia, it's in the south and a couple hours north from Helsinki. It's funny. It's actually, the town is even named after our family kind of heritage. So it's been there for a while. My mom taught physiology and anatomy, nursing, and my dad is an agronomist. So dad was soil, forest, land. Mom was humans, physiology. And that was the lineage that I was brought up with. But as far as life, very different than most of America. Probably the closest would be like, think of Maine, maybe Vermont, that kind of scenery and vibe. But the Nordic culture is definitely quite different. We would shower and drink spring water. We would pick up our old wild berries and freeze them, but like the same kind of freezers that now a lot of people use for ice baths. Those, we would have 3-4 of those just full of mushrooms. You would, you would hunt moose where I grew up and further up north, reindeer for meat. And then we had like heirloom cows. So we had limousine type, like nicer breeds. And then obviously mushroom, that's a big thing. And then oats. So a lot of like certain oats and potatoes as a form of carbohydrate. So definitely not carbohydrate bashful life. But yeah, I went to a foraging school. So my elementary school was like, almost think of like Waldorf, Steiner type stuff. But my great-grandfather started this environmental school that I attended. And I thought my life was very normal. As a kid, you don't know. You see TV, like, Hollywood and all that stuff, but it just seems not real. So to me, life was very normal. It was not a big deal. You would cross-country ski to school, cross the frozen lake. No, I'm serious. And you would cross-country ski through the frozen lake to school, and that was normal. It's not a big deal. The other kids did it as well. So
yeah, everybody else is doing it. It's the new norm, right?
Yeah, but there's a lot of wisdom. But it took me to get a little older to appreciate some of it, because life is really tough. I feel like a lot of people who grew up in a city and start waking up to the power of nature and value of farming, agriculture, permaculture, herbalism, they're like, this is cool, I'm going to do it. But it's really hard. And like, I know you hunt, so like hunting is really hard. It's not easy. Or you could make it easy. I'm not saying that, but generally speaking, life living off the land is really difficult. And a lot of people will have a rude awakening when they try to do that for an extended time period, especially in a place where the nature is also harsh. It's quite a lot easier in let's say Hawaii than
Alaska or Finland.
Although Hawaii has its own challenges, but yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you moved here. When did you move here?
About 5 years ago. But
so you had already started Four Sigmatic before coming over?
Yeah, I've lived in 10 countries. The US is my 10th country I'm living in, and I was living first in Switzerland when I started it, and then partly because we didn't have outside investors, we were broke. We had like $50K in our bank account to buy inventory basically, and that's it. I moved to Asia, kind of live cheaper with my savings in the beginning, but yeah. So I've been here 5 years, and it's been a fun journey.
Well, let's talk Four Sigmatic. Let's
Sure.
get into this. Obviously, you're exposed to, it's a part of your culture. You understand probably a great deal more than most people from a very young age, the power of herbs, the power of mushrooms. And of course, we'll talk psilocybin, but there are so many more medicinal mushrooms out there
Yeah.
that have carried a lot of value in things like Vedic cultures and Chinese medicine that aren't necessarily, people still have this idea that it's, yeah, but that's that, and it's like, well, how can we validate those things? And it's like, no. For people have understood the health and the value of these things for thousands of years. We don't need a double-blind study to necessarily validate that. Now, of course, we have all the science in the world now to validate this stuff. I'm sure you've seen Fantastic Fungi. Yeah, fucking incredible. So I know once that's mainstream and not just in select cities, that'll really be a beautiful eye-opener for a lot of people about the power of these medicines. But I guess just break down some of that. Because of your exposure at a young age, did you know that there could be a marketplace for this? Like, how did you formulate the idea that I'm going to bring this to the masses?
That's a great question. The answer is I did not know that there would be a marketplace. And even 5 years ago when I brought it to the US, I wanted to believe that there was a marketplace for it. I did not know for sure that there was a marketplace. I grew up more with culinary mushrooms. So that's the chanterelles, the russellas, and the boletes and stuff. Definitely was a marketplace for that. And about 15 years ago, me and my friend won an innovation award for discovering this rare mushroom and this really expensive mushroom. So I knew for culinary mushrooms, there was serving the 1%, the Michelin star restaurants. Having exposure to Asian cultures, I knew there was a massive market there for functional mushrooms. But getting it to Western world that was more mycophobic, scared of mushrooms, I did not know that existed. And for me, the draw was definitely through optimal human performance. That was the thing. I just knew, even before I started Four Sigmatic, I was thinking what is meaningful to me? And there was a few things that came across real strong. One is that I hated hype that didn't have at least a thought to it. It was just for the sake of something, like the latest, greatest exotic berry is going to solve all your problems. And that's why even my company's name, Four Sigmatic, it just means kind of the top 50 to 100 most researched foods in the world. And funny enough, the most researched foods in the world are also often have huge cultural heritage. So, the green tea and the coffee and the coconut and the hemp, the cinnamon, but also same way, like the ashwagandha and the reishi and the turmeric and, all that stuff. So that was really important for me. The other one was what, from a physiology point of view, what is the 80-20? If we can't fix it all immediately, what is the 80-20? And I came with 3 answers. One was immunity. I thought it was highly underrated. People only cared about immunity when they had a flu or something. But that impacts obviously cancer, autoimmune, hyperactive, passive immune response. The other one was hormonal response. So partly in the nervous system, but partly also how we produce hormones in our glands and how does that impact everything we do. It's almost the operating system. So, that was just massive. And just kind of going through that list, I realized what would I recommend to someone? What would be my top 5 prescriptions for all these things? And mushrooms were part of it all, through gut health, through immunomodulation, to, beat psychedelics and non-psychedelics to the brain. And that's where I realized this is just something people, not saying that mushrooms are a cure all for everything, but they're definitely underappreciated and they have so many more powers than just putting it on top of a salad or a pizza. So yeah, and nobody's really doing it. So there's a little bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah, that's a beautiful leap of faith. And I'm I have a lot of gratitude for the fact, people like you that take that, the Paul Stamets of the world, that have had transformative experiences and understand that there's a lot of medicine there. It's cool to see because it's something that I think anytime there's a perfect storm, and obviously this isn't to say all the conditions were right, that's why you've done so well. It's not that at all. But, with this health and wellness movement, people becoming more conscious. And of course, this always comes from a place of crisis. Like diseases are higher than ever, obesity is higher than ever, but people actually are paying attention to what they're putting in their body now. And there is this whole gaping hole of food substance that can be utilized to make us better, to help create wellness. And you guys have carved out a big space in the space for that. And it's some of my, I mean, over the years, I've weeded the garden more than I've added shit in. I think when you get to a certain place in health and wellness, you realize health doesn't come from the next great thing that you're going to add to it. And getting rid of 90% of the shit in your supplement cabinet is probably a good idea, you know, but really sticking to what works. And I mean, shameless plug for your company that I have no affiliation with. Like, I fucking bring your products with me everywhere I go. Every time
I saw it in your bag.
Yeah, it's in my bag. It's in my fanny pack. It's on my person every fucking day because I don't want to be without it. And I really feel a difference, you know.
That's amazing.
I've done the Stamets microdosing protocol for the last month, and I use your Lion's Mane packs and cordyceps from Onnit, the Shroom Tech Sport.
How much niacin do you take?
You know, that varies. So
And flush or non-flush?
It's flush. So that's where it gets tricky. And I'll play with my dose from anywhere from a true micro of 100 milligrams to more of a concert dose of like 500 milligrams. And each dose contains 100 milligrams of the niacin. So it'll fluctuate too with it.
Yeah.
And I've played with higher doses of niacin. Something I want to talk with you about as we get into saunas is that niacin combo there, because it's something I've heard Mercola talk about. But
I just did it a couple of weeks ago in Amsterdam. It's powerful.
Yeah,
you can also combine it with exercise. It doesn't have to be the sauna to get the similar thing, but it's definitely powerful at sauna. Yeah.
Well, I want to dive into that, but just real quick, like the thing that I noticed was like everything, especially as I'm obviously we've got hand pans here. We just had a Bria on the podcast yesterday, so you guys will release around the same time. My creativity has gone through the fucking roof. Like I'm listening, and I've never thought of myself as somebody who was great at music. Never played instruments when I was a kid. It was football and fighting pretty much. And you know, on this last month protocol with playing more musical instruments, Native American flute, and painting, like I can just see huge changes in a very short period of time. Like the ability to rewire the brain rapidly through intention, not just I'm going to take this and think everything gets fixed, but give it an actual direction, I think is really important too, because it will affect the hardware positively regardless. But if you have an intention on what you wish to bring into your life and actually improve upon, then I think that's where a lot of this can be magnified medicine.
Oh, beyond. It's same in herbalism. You never use a single herb. Like that's never an idea. You should never just like go and take one thing. There's always like a supporting herb and a balancing herb or herbs with it, you know, and there's a million examples we can talk about. I feel like same in lifestyle design. So if you do have this intentional practice, let's say you have this mushroom supplement or a psychedelic or whatever thing, by stacking consciously the right practice, be it painting or be it, you know, there's again, a million examples. 1 + 1 is 3. Like that's the whole, what we're trying to build. It's like you said, is like getting rid of the 90% of the stuff you do, getting back to the basics, but also understanding the value of synergies. And those synergies might not be like more is better. Synergy might be better is better. And that's a big thing. But having those intentional practices that mean something to you is definitely powerful. So
yeah, it's reminding me of some of the concepts in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits.
I haven't read that one.
It's phenomenal. He was on the show a while ago before the book came out. But you know, anybody who it's fucking New Year, still January as we record this, you know, people have this list of shit they want to get done, and they want to change everything and do it all at the same time. And obviously, that's really hard to accomplish. So his thing is, you have your goals, you prioritize which one is the most important thing, and you just start with one at a time. And as you begin to develop some level of mastery, and it's a known habit that you don't need to worry about, that's when you add in. other ones. And from there, the goal is not to get mastery in any one specific thing. It's just to get 1% better at everything you're adding. And from there, that's where you get 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think about that too, with whatever intentional thing that we're bringing in from a supplement standpoint, or the microdosing protocol, and how that layers with the practices that you have in life. Like, what is the goal behind this thing? Is it to be smarter, or is it to be smarter where specifically, And I think those are some missing ingredients in actually fine tuning what it is exactly that we're looking to get better at.
Yeah. I think most of the time, myself included, I sometimes overestimate what I can do in, 6 months, but I underestimate what can be done in 5 years. And that's, I think, where it gets pretty magical, is having that approach exactly, but being intentional about which way, because otherwise it's like you have this rocket ship, but you don't know where you're flying. You go 2 degrees left or right. After all these years, you're in a very different part of the space if we went left or right 2 degrees. So over time is a powerful ally. And the intention is huge.
Yeah, it's hard to see those little things while you're in the moment. But if it's something that you're doing because you absolutely love it and enjoy it, it doesn't matter. It's easy to go through 5 years of, having an intentional practice of learning to play music or paint or whatever the case is, or even just, having the intentional practice of essentialism, not doing a bunch of shit you quote unquote have to do, but doing the things that you really enjoy doing and making that the priority. Those are practices that take a long time, but when there's meaning behind it and joy behind it, it's a lot easier to go through a full 5-year span and look back and be like, damn, we did it,
Totally.
As opposed to just, I'm supposed to lose weight because the doctor said so, or I'm supposed to do this.
Yeah. It's not internal journey. You're outsourcing it, the energy. You're putting it outside of your body because it's coming from outside of your body. You're not owning it.
I like that. Well, we touched a little bit on the niacin sauna. I want to break down all things sauna because there's a lot of wisdom from where you come from. And obviously Dr. Rhonda Patrick going on Rogan's and really blowing up the scene with all the science of sauna therapy and things like that. And there's a couple of things that I see that are big differences in the way you guys utilize sauna and heat shock proteins versus a lot of the stuff that's out around infrared saunas. And it's something that I tell people is there's a greater physiological adaptation to something that's hard. Like if your body, if I squat the bar 1,000 times, it's different than squatting 500 pounds. It's a different adaptation. If I'm in a really hot sauna, even for a shorter period of time, and I just work on extending that time window, that's going to have a much greater impact on my body than staying in something that's 140 degrees for an hour and a half. But talk a bit about sauna, some of the differences among saunas, because, infrared saunas tend to be cheaper, not always, but I think it's worth it to do the hot rock. And I certainly feel more of a response when I'm using a traditional sauna versus an infrared sauna.
Yeah. So I'm definitely a sauna aficionado. And just to kind of frame the conversation, sauna is a Finnish word. It's the only Finnish word in the English language. And sauna means something very specific. And but there are many types of hot rooms around the world. Hot rooms are not unique to Finland or Russia or whatever. There's so many hammams, and different parts of the world have to have different kinds of sweating practices. So through and through, I think all sweat practices are good. You just kind of where they originate, kind of talk a little bit about what was the purpose of those sweating practices. And obviously, if you're in Alaska or Finland or Russia or Korea, where it's super cold in winter, it's a different kind of intensity. But if we go purely from health purpose, the sauna truly does refer to either a smoke sauna or a dry sauna that will trigger those heat shock proteins. And I don't think a lot of these like hotel saunas that are like 150, 160, I just don't see them as saunas, really. It's not really, it's a sweat practice. And again, there is plenty of good benefits for detoxification. But if you do want that adaptation, like you said, there's something to be said about something that is difficult. Same with cold therapy. So there are differences between 30-degree water in Lapland where it's -40 outside and it's 30 degrees or 28 degrees because there's a stream, or otherwise it would freeze. It's a different element than 50 degrees at indoors. It's just a different thing. And both are probably beneficial, but the magic is, I think, it's the harder it is, probably the better it is for you. So let's go back to how we use it. We do have electric dry saunas and then wooden dry saunas. I think both can be good. Wood burn is usually a little better. It more comes down to the size of the room and the shape of the room that matters, and then the routine. We also have smoke saunas where you put the smoke inside for many hours and then you ventilate, but it has this smoky feeling. So moisture obviously is a big factor as well. So a lot of good saunas, you go and throw water into the benches first and then kind of absorb into the walls. But classically, the practice would be that we go to this dry sauna, we start hot after an exercise. So cross-country skiing, running, or just a day of hard work at the farm can also do it. So it would usually be like after being active. Then it would go to the sauna. We get birch leaves. So there's a hitting practice to further improve blood circulation on the surface level. Also, there are oils that are also actually similar compounds that are found in chaga that are absorbed from the birch tree. So betulin. So in chaga, there's betulinic acid, very powerful antioxidant. So you spank and then you go into cold. And that should go at least 3 times back and forth. So the base rule is you go 3 times. And if it gets too crazy, like kids are like probably can't handle 210 degrees as well, they're going to step one level lower, but they're going to do it still. So it's better to do it at some capacity than not do it at all. So you do that circle and you go into cold water. You drop your shoulders, take deep breaths. Usually, even no matter how cold the water is, you try to stay for about a minute. And then if at the end, you always end cold. So if you don't end in the water, you hang out outside in the cold for 5 to 10 minutes to cool off. So you never end hot. You always end cold.
And you start hot.
Yes, pretty much exclusively start hot. There are some crazy people who do it the other way, but usually you finish an exercise or work at the farm and then you go hot and then you go water and then at least 3 rounds. And yeah, it's the funny things. Then you make sausages on the fire. So you put a sausage on the coals and then you eat a sausage, and some people have beer or whatever.
That sounds like an incredible way to finish.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you eat a sausage at the end. And then, yeah, some people have a beer or something to end the day. But yeah.
Yeah, I always wondered that. I've done a couple, what is it, banya, the Russian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've done a couple banyas, and I always wondered why they were beating me,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, this is a part of the practice. And I see they've got like their little beanies on,
The
like
hat,
the hat thing. And I just
and
didn't
that helps
understand
a
it,
lot
yeah.
if you do super hot saunas, if you have one of the sauna hats. And then if you do serious cold winter ones, walking to the water, usually have a little booties, kind of like almost like a surf type booties or Crocs. But it's just like walking when it's -40 outside and your feet get stuck on the way. It's just better to have a little booties. And then some people wear gloves if they swim, but it's definitely the extremities that you protect, both hot and cold, your ears and the steam that comes out of your head.
I love it. Well, let's talk. I guess my last question on sauna is let's talk about this niacin combo, because that's something that I've experimented with a little bit, not in the sauna. I've read about it and I've experimented with some of the higher doses. I've had a gram once, which was I should have worked my way up to.
It's tough.
It's really tough.
I would recommend doing 500 and 500. Start 500, and then maybe 30 to 60 minutes in, add a 500, then go straight to a gram.
Okay. And that talk a little bit about like the why behind this.
Yeah, I mean, most things come back to what are difficult when you challenge your body, you squat or you hike or you do these things. It gives a temporary shock to the body, which makes the body actually weaker, but then also signals certain parts of physiology to like, hey, you got to step up. right? If you go too hard, there's a risk of injury or illness, or too hard too long. But you can go pretty hard on a short time window if you're mindful. And the same goes for our cells. So there's a cellular energy, cellular function that puts pressure on the body. And in this case, you're playing a lot with thermodynamics of your body using a B vitamin, so niacin, to flush. You go a little harder than you probably should. That creates this like irritation in your cellular levels, that creates irritation on your skin and sweating and redness in your body. That when you combine it with sauna, that does increase sweating and redness in your skin. You're kind of hitting it from internally and externally. So you're getting that from within and also from the out, kind of doubling down. 1 + 1 is 3. And the benefits of that, a lot of people use it for fat absorption and just kind of ability to absorb nutrients. That's a very common way to do that. But I would say generally, from if you think of what I care about is more of the longevity side, is just giving these kind of like conscious shocks occasionally to the cells, and that would be like a pretty interesting thing to do. And you feel very blissful afterwards. That's another reason why I do enjoy it. But yeah, my practice with the niacin is usually 250, and it's a very comfortable. I have taken a gram, and it's very, very difficult for a moment, or uncomfortable for a moment. But I would say like 250 if you combine it with exercise is great. So I do yoga or running just to kind of like get the blood moving, just nostril breath. So I'm not going after like getting my best run or my best yoga or something. You could do squats, but just focus on your breathing the nose, warming up the body. And when it starts to get quite uncomfortable, then go to the sauna. And just going to be itchy and sweaty. But yeah, cellular energy production, particularly how you absorb lipids, is kind of why people usually do it. But I think just improving that blood circulation will have so many benefits. Like in Chinese, you believe in the qi and the improvement of qi. There's something to be said about that. But
yeah, no doubt. Well, we're touching on qi. Let's dive into some of the plant medicines.
Yeah.
When was this? Is this, obviously, I don't want to talk about, the Santa Claus story if we have time. I know you talked about it with Aubrey a couple years ago, but talk about your first introduction into plant medicines. Was it psilocybin? And expand upon some of those experiences and how they progressed over the years.
Yeah, I feel like every culture has had some sort of a mind-altering substance, and obviously, almost all societies, the last 2-3 generations have been pretty anti of mind-altering. Before that, even in pockets, certain religions were kind of not supportive of that. Finland is no different. So Finland has had for thousands of years long history with psychedelics. There is psilocybin there. I would say more commonly it is the amanita that is consumed, and one other swamp plant, which is more similarly mind-altering. And both of them, amanita and this swamp plant, are the ones that I've tried in the very beginning in very small dosages. So those would be the first ones I've had is amanita, and shouldn't be anybody's first psychedelic. But they are darker. They're definitely like, GABA agonist, but like they are on the more, not sedative, but like numbing kind of darker layer of that versus a more, 2A serotonin receptor, psilocybin, happy, loving, connective. There's wisdom in both, but they're very different. But right now, Finland in the last 2-3 generations has been very kind of anti psychedelics again, which has been a bummer. It's been combined with more synthetic drugs, and there's a lot of fear among people. But because of the proximity to mushrooms and proximity to more indigenous cultures, it was like finding fairy rings of amanitas was, I don't know how old I was, 4 or 5.
Oh, wow.
Probably when you first get exposed to them. But there is among foragers, there's always been, for the Amanita family, there's this like deep beauty and respect but fear, because the Amanita family also has some of the most poisonous mushrooms in the world. Most mushroom related deaths for foragers happen because Amanita mushrooms, not Amanita muscaria, but the destroying angel and the death cap. But so there's this fear and beauty in this family of mushrooms that you get taught as a young kid. It's like one of the first mushrooms you get taught is Amanita muscaria, and the destroying angel is like probably the top 3 mushrooms I was taught as a kid. And so for me, for psychedelics, I knew about it so early on, and I had some exposure in small dosages, but I felt that I was not ready for that. And I feel like psychedelics have these 2 really beautiful windows for men, when it's like when you're like somewhere 11 to 14 years old, rite of passage. There's a really beautiful time somewhere there to explore. It sounds really odd, but as a parent, it probably is a great time to expose your kids into psychedelics. And then there's a time when you probably, I mean, Freud and even like we're young, dumb, and full of cum. Like there's a period when it's harder to get that wisdom because we're on our way, and maybe other types of work need to happen. And then, you know, when you start to like 30s and 40s, those become again like massively valuable tools, assets. So I had this, like, I felt that I didn't know a reason why I would do. I even went to Amazon for ayahuasca in my early 20s, and I didn't take any. I was like, I'm not. It doesn't feel organic at that point. And that's just something I would encourage everyone, is just listen, is like, why am I doing it? Don't do it because others are doing it. Know that they're very powerful. Know that they're very safe. Know that there's a lot of beauty, but don't do it just because other people are doing it. Ask yourself why. And then when you find the calling, go for it. And, you know, that's, I think, very important. And yeah, for me, it's my uses, from especially for psilocybin, is more on the macro dose. I'm a huge believer in higher dose, less often, maybe twice a year. A lot of my ancestors do winter solstice, summer solstice. I think there may be other compounds, iboga, maybe LSD, where the microdosing principle is a little more powerful. But with the right microdosing protocol, there's definitely like, it's a very interesting world. But I feel like psilocybin is more of like less often, rare, bigger dose type of knowledge. At least that's mine.
That's funny you say that, because I'm just coming to the end of the 30 days with psilocybin, and I'd read the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide by Jim Fadiman, where he studied microdosing for 30 years. A lot of his gatherings of wisdom is coming strictly with LSD. And so I'd done the every 4th day protocol he recommends with LSD, and I absolutely loved it. I did it for 2 months with my wife, probably about 4 years ago. LSD is easier to gauge. It's much easier to gauge because the same thing. Which flush did it come from? That doesn't equate with LSD. LSD is also very energetic. And I think a lot of people that are using microdosing for their work specifically, like whether it's people in tech in the Silicon Valley or any of these, articles that get written about it, they want to be able to do their emails and get shit done.
Yeah.
LSD will do that for you. Psilocybin will tell me some days, you're not doing don't touch your computer, go outside and sit down by a tree. Yeah. And that's a beautiful medicine if I can listen to that. If I couldn't, it would be very hard to try to, I'd be, forcing a square peg in a round hole trying to get shit done when the medicine tells me otherwise. And so I think that, that very much what you're saying, I get that.
But definitely what we know of, and also what I do believe energetically, but like psilocybin will be impactful even on one use case, at least a year, if not years. And again, what is your intention? Is it neuroplasticity? Is it finding answers? Like, that's also a good thing to gauge with that one, is like, what is the purpose? There is part of the receptors that get used to it. So you need to keep certain breaks. So this, like, I think based on what we know today, the daily use seems to be not quite aligned of what we know about it today. You might want to, depending on how small of a microdose you take, you might want to space it out every other day, every third day even, to get like a 36-hour window. I think it will be fascinating in the next like couple of years. We'll learn a lot more, but I think it's also more powerful if you look at from a classic herbalistic practice, is that you first get to know the plant on higher dose, and then when you bring it in these more smaller dosages, it's more familiar with it, and that sounds pretty woo-woo. But you could use creatine as an example, where there's a build-up period and then a maintenance period. So it's not that far-fetched idea, is that, you know, the power of the microdosing is probably also partially because you have had those higher doses multiple times, and then kind of reminding, kind of like, hey, remember, and then kind of that might be also part of the wisdom. But I think different substances work better or worse in high dosages. You know, iboga or ibogaine is pretty rough on high dosages, but it might work pretty well on smaller dosages, and like vice versa. So.
Yeah, iboga's a really incredible compound. It's one that I had played after. I think Tim Ferriss talked about his use as his friend Slim Barris, and gave like his full protocol of hedonic calendar from micro to the macro. And he was using, I think, ibogaine HCI and or HCl, and so I was able to get some of that, and I noticed it has its energy. Like iboga is a very, like, you don't sleep on it, it's up. And so that really paired well with the morning coffee, and I could do a lot. But one of the things as I was starting to learn more about it was that made it really cool is that it actually increases receptor density in the brain for dopamine as well as serotonin. So our feel-good neurotransmitters are all there, and they're all getting increased from the use. Whereas smoking cigarettes, you'll start to remove some of those. And so I found that to be fascinating about that compound. Talk a little bit. I do want to get to the Santa story, but talk about your first experience with Amanita, because I've heard, like, my brother Porangi had done it before, and like the history, from my understanding, was that the reindeer would take it and then they would drink the urine to prevent some of the issues around that. How did you consume it, and what was the experience like?
The first couple times because I had this fear that was installed upon me, or respect. The dosages were really small, so I felt like woozy. I would consume it both as fresh and dried in the beginning. Never in the beginning, the urine. I can get to the reason why the urine is there. You become, I would say, being drunk is a pretty good, like, spinning head. Like, you feel there's a toxic reaction a little bit. Not like bad, not you're vomiting or anything like that, but you feel a little woozy. You start to get these like darker emotions, like, you know, the berserk story. You probably know how they would so, you know, the berserks so these are these warriors that were like fearless, and there would be much less of them, and they would just go hard and just basically kill. Berserker, exactly. They would kill everyone. It was this tribe, and it was said that they took. So there's two theories of that. One was the swamp plant that I've taken as well, and the other one is the Amanita muscaria, and they would take these pre-battle, and you just kind of think of it as someone who drinks, and they almost like black out and get rage. They get this just like
shuts empathy and compassion off.
Correct, and and that GABA agonist, like that, like blocks certain, like, universal love, and then like this fear or hatred kicks in, and that can be a lot of the Amanita feeling. So there's two compounds that, depending how you consume it, you will impact the feeling a lot. So there's muscimol, which is the psychoactive compound. That's like the good, and then there's the apotenic acid, which is, you know, the toxic compound, which is not good. And when you consume it fresh or dried, you will have the apotenic acid that then converts into muscimol. And there's a way how you cook it in a certain way to kind of reduce, or some say even completely remove, but I don't fully believe that, like reduce the amount of apotenic acid and then get the muscimol. But you have to eat quite a lot of Amanita. That's also the thing. is in order to get enough muscimol, so a lot of people have taken 5-10 grams and not felt anything. You might have to take 20 to 50 grams of dried mushrooms, so the volume is a little bigger. Also depends if it's younger. Younger, it tends to have higher amounts of muscimol versus if it's bigger. Big amanitas actually might be worse than small amanitas. So that's also period of the year that it's collected can impact. But so you have to eat more. You might get quite sick. So bless you. No worries. So you have to eat quite a lot, and when you eat a lot, you will also get quite a bit of ibotenic acid, and you might get, that's where you get that flu-like. So that's some of the Sana stories, ideas of why did the Sana or the shaman, why was it red? And because you get this like almost like not a niacin flush, but like similar kind of like uncomfortable feelings, and in order before it converts into. So it's almost like the getting high period is quite painful until you cross the valley, and then the ibotenic acid leaves your body and the muscimol kind of kicks in. But why the pee and the urine is that the first person who will eat it will get sick, but then the urine your liver has removed the ibotenic acid, and the urine concentrates. Urine often is a concentration of various like not waste chemicals, but things that the body doesn't have a use for, or you'd had excess of, like vitamin C, you had excess vitamin C, you pee it out. So, but it's a concentrated form. So in this case, when you drink someone's urine, a human or reindeer that has consumed high amounts of amanita, you have removed the toxic element or the brain lesioning element of ibotenic acid, and you have concentrated the psychedelic compound. So then you have to consume less. So it's easier for your body, and you'll have higher amounts of muscimol. And there might be other compounds that impact on amanita that we don't know, but those are the kind of, and there's a couple forms of muscimol as well, compound wise, but that's probably how it works.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because I've never really taken a deep dive into that compound, but it makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense from like a Jungian analyst standpoint of going into the shadow work.
Oh,
like
you're touching it right now. So when and why amanita could make sense, again, it's shouldn't be on anybody's top 5, but where it could make sense is going back to the indigenous people and when and how they used it. They used it on winter solstice. So in Lapland, in winter solstice, you might get 2 hours of sunlight. So the sun creeps up a little bit and then goes down. So it's almost complete darkness. Okay. And they have a belief of these 3 layers of the heavens where the gods live. And then there's the underworld. Underworld is not where only negative. That's where everybody who dies goes underground. And you go with that substance, you go mostly underground to talk to people who have died. So that is the world. That is the shadow work. That is the part of you that you think you are, but you don't want to be. Or you're, some people say, multi-generational traumas and fears that you're processing with that. And that is, you don't take that in LA in a sunny day. Like you take that when you go to in winter into a cabin and darkness and let the dragons fly in.
I love it. That's beautiful. Well, let's talk Santa. You wrote a book about this since your podcast with Aubrey, and it's awesome. I think on the internet, maybe, I don't know when I saw it. It was years ago, but some of that story has been told in various ways, and just it's really fascinating to me to think of that. But break that down for people who maybe are unfamiliar with it.
Yeah. So the origins of Santa Claus is what we're talking about, and how that relates to psychedelics, particularly this mushroom Amanita muscaria. So maybe taking one step back, pretty much all the cultural stories we have a different origin that is commercially brought to us, be it Halloween, Celtic traditions, Easter. And sometimes we forget this. We're like, there's just Coca-Cola. No, there's a reason why the reindeers are there. There's a reason why the Christmas tree is there. And I think from all the things that we get sold commercially, this might be one of the biggest lies or misunderstandings of the origins. So And why I also say that is partly because Santa Claus is arguably the world's most famous character. Like, there isn't, like, across every religion around the world, people know Santa Claus. Like, it could be the most famous character in the world. But the story of Santa Claus goes back 8 to 10,000 years. A lot of people, when they talk about Santa Claus, they kind of vaguely aware of, like, Saint Nicholas, they think it's German. But the story to Santa Claus and what we think of today came to the U.S. through New York or New Amsterdam. It was brought mostly here by the Dutch, where it's called Sinterklaas, and the Dutch got it from the Germans. But it's not a German thing, because Saint Nicholas is actually Turkish. So Saint Nicholas was a Turkish bishop, and that was a time when Christianity had split between Orthodox Christianity and Catholic, and Constantinople, today's Istanbul, and Rome had their battle, and the Italians actually went to even steal Saint Nicholas's grave. But the story has traveled along the way, and everybody's added their own spice to it. Like the Dutch really built on their elves that were actually black slaves. So there's kind of some effed up stuff there as well. But the real story does not begin in Turkey, and that's really funny. Is like, people don't even think about that, but like, there's no reindeers in Turkey. Like, where's the North Pole? But then there's a Turkish bishop. It's Christianity wanted to absorb a pagan story to themselves. It's San Pedro. I mean, there's so many examples of it.
Well, even the birth of Christ on December 25th to replace the winter solstice.
Well, great that you said that. So, but there's so many proven evidence of this. I'll get to that. But stories are stories. There's always a spice. There's an element. Things get added. Things get removed. That's normal. But the real heritage of this story comes from the Slavic countries through this last official indigenous culture left in Europe, called the Sami. The Sami live in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. And funny enough, if you talk to any Russian or Ukrainian person about Christmas, they actually celebrate this like Old Man Frost, Dead Moors. Even still today, it's like a similar outfit, kind of more bluish, a little bit of red, but more blue, versus Santa is more red and a little bit of blue. But they got it from these Sami, and the Sami have been there 8 to 10,000 years, much before the Vikings. Vikings been there 1,300 years or so. And why is the Santa story really relevant, and how does that all tie? So I'm just going to give a couple of the facts because it's a long story. But basically, the Sami believe that all living things have a soul. Rocks have a soul. The wind has a soul. Animism, exactly. And they live very deeply in conjunction with nature. You might imagine going from, like, in winter it's minus 40. It's very real. So they believe that this afterworld and heavens, and they believe that they're sons of God, of Sun. They're sons and daughters of Sun. Sun had sex with a giant. So this is their belief, origin story, basically. And they're the children of the giant and the sun. And so they would have magic, so ceremonies. And the two big ceremonies were winter solstice and summer solstice. Summer solstice, there was 24 hours of sunlight, and winter, it was almost all darkness. And the person conducting the ceremony is called Noida, the shaman. The shaman at that time did more than just being a shaman. They were a doctor, they were a priest, they were an elder. So that's why probably you think that Santa has lived forever, because there's been thousands of Santas, because every region would have your own shaman, Noida. And the shaman would conduct these ceremonies. There was also summer solstice ceremony, but this winter solstice ceremony was more famous. And this, by the way, the only area where reindeers live. So that's also kind of one indication that this origins of this story is where the reindeers are. And for the winter solstice ceremony, it was a lot about death, end of the year, and starting the new year, and talking to our deceased elderly. So your ancestors who had died, and asking wisdom from them for the new year. So that was like part of what they believed. So let's gather as a family. Let's have a ceremony. Let's talk to the dead. Let's ask for questions and insights, and let's apply them to the new year. And in order to have this ceremony, the Sami shaman would collect this psychedelic mushroom of that area called Amanita muscaria, which is the world's most famous mushroom, but nobody knows it. It's the mushroom emoji. It's the mushroom that Super Mario takes. It's the red mushroom with the white dots, the kind of classic toadstool. It's the one that you see in Disney movies, Fantasia. You see it at the Snow White. You see it at all these songs. It's everywhere in pop culture.
It's all over the book that I read my son, the Mother Goose fairy tales.
Yeah,
it's in all of them, littered throughout it.
And it's a psychedelic mushroom. It's actually legal in every state in the U.S. as a psychedelic, by the way. It's one of the only legal psychedelics, except I believe Tennessee is the one where it's not legal. But yeah, the shaman would need this mushroom, but this mushroom grows not in the snow. You need to collect it in the summer, fall, and you need to sun dry it. Otherwise, it gets moldy. So what the shaman would do is go to the forest, find this mushroom, and this mushroom grows under their sacred tree, the Pinacea trees. So the pine family of trees is very sacred to many indigenous cultures, including like the Mayans. So that's why maybe the pine cone, the pineal gland, that whole connection of the soul and consciousness, sacred tree. Think of like the Avatar movie where the Na'vi people believe that the
home
trees
tree.
are, home tree. This is the home tree, the Pinacea trees, particularly the spruce. So spruce tree. So that is the Christmas tree you see at Rockefeller Center in New York. And this psychedelic mushroom needs to live in a symbiotic relationship with these Pinacea trees. So under the Christmas tree, where you would normally put presents, is a psychedelic mushroom that the shaman would collect and sun-dried by putting the mushroom hanging from the Christmas tree branches. So the sun would dry it, add vitamin D to it, because they were also vitamin D deficient in the winter because you don't get sun. And then do loops. So there would be one tree eventually that would be full of these red mushrooms. So even if you go back to old Christmas or Yuletide posters, photos, books, images, even from the German time, you don't even have to go older than that, the kids are holding the psychedelic mushroom. They're not holding red balls hanging from a Christmas tree. The Christmas tree decorations, even in New York, old New York, would be psychedelic mushrooms hanging, not red balls. The red balls got changed later. It was a psychedelic mushroom hanging from the tree. And that's why you put presents under the tree, because that's where the psychedelic grows, or hanging from on top of a fire, because if it was not sunny at that time when you were harvesting, you would dry it on top of a fireplace. So then shaman carries these, puts them on a sack, and reindeer is the domesticated mammal to kind of travel around. So have a sled, wearing a little coat, beard, probably an elderly person, traveling from village to village to give ceremonies with a sack full of psychedelics, getting into their home, which is called kota. And kota is like a semi-permanent teepee. So think of a teepee, but you need it for winter, so it's a little more insulated.
Like a yurt.
It's like a yurt, but like shape-wise closer to teepee, but yurt. And it has a small entrance that you kind of crawl in. And then there's a hole at the top because there's a fire inside, because otherwise you freeze your ass. So, but often there would be a snowstorm and this little narrow entrance would get shut in. So the chimney or the hole for the fire would be your secondary exit and entrance. So it could be that you come in and out through the chimney with the psychedelics, you hold court, you take a psychedelic, you get all red and jolly and you're laughing and you're talking to the ancestors. And then you might see reindeers flying, or you might see visions and stuff like that. And then sometimes the families would join by drinking the urine from this kuksamak. So this is actually where the psychedelics also, either with the reindeer or from another human's pee, would be drank from this mug. So this is also a psychedelic urine mug. And
the first, when you handed me that, I was like, this is my fucking medicine cup.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can fit 30 grams of mushrooms in there, but I certainly can try.
Yeah, you can cook it and you can sip it along the way. So you don't have to like chug it either. Like you can make your amanita tea or whatever medicine and then kind of slowly sip on it. So yeah, and then you would have this ceremony, you would have these visions. But what is beautiful, so mostly Christmas has become this ridiculous commercial holiday. But the beauty of like gathering with family, slowing down, looking at the previous year, setting intentions for the next year, putting fire or candles, giving gifts or like a celebration, that is still beautiful. Like there's definitely a place for that. It's just all the hoopla of like commercialism has added. And then there's a whole story about the elves, but maybe we'll save it for another time. So,
oh, that's fucking fantastic. Thank you so much, brother.
no worries.
So, your company, Four Sigmatic, where can people get it?
I don't know, a lot of places.
Everywhere, right?
Yeah. I don't know, Whole Foods, Sephora, online, Amazon, foursigmatic.com. We sell internationally as well. I started the company overseas, so you can get it globally as well pretty well. I know you have listeners all around the world now.
Yeah, brother. And where can people find you online?
I'm really bad. I don't have Facebook or anything. I have a private Instagram. I am Tero, where I post dumb photos when I feel like it. Sometimes go a month without posting, but I am Tero, Tero is my personal. And then Four Sigmatic, FOURSIGMATIC everywhere. We're much better there. We're relaunching our Mushroom Academy soon. So we have a free Mushroom Academy we'd have for years. So completely free. You can study about the knowledge about mushrooms online. No cost, no strings attached. We just love sharing the word, and we just reshot the videos, and they should be out soon. So
incredible.
A new
That'll
version.
Be on foursigmatic.com?
Yeah. Or mushroomacademy.com might be as well. Either way, you'll get there.
Cool. We'll link to it all in the show notes, so you don't have to jot this shit down. But I'll have Giles get with you and get all the correct links.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, brother. This has been fantastic.
Glad we got to finally do this.
Yeah, brother.
It was a long time coming.
Big time.
Next time, Lapland or we'll go to the cabins in Finland.
Maybe
we'll do niacin. Yeah, well, summer solstice. I'll be there summer solstice. If you want, have you ever had? Oh, kid,
we
got the baby.
We got little wolf on the way, but 2021, I'm down for summertime. I'll bring the whole family. Incredible.
Yeah, 2021, 2022. We have I have cabins, and there's separate saunas. So each cabin has a sauna, and then there's a separate sauna building, and the sauna building has a bedroom as well. So you can come with homies.
Very cool.
And the baby. So.
Yeah, I'm in, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
awesome
thanks a lot.